Hi everybody, Shannon Belmont here again to talk about lab number 1. This lab is going to walk you through ArcGIS and some basic map making. So this lab has some step-by-step instructions that are going to introduce you to all the different things that you're going to need to be able to do in ArcGIS, but most importantly just get started and familiarize yourself. The second part of the lab is to submit a map that you've made with all the mad GIS skills that you've acquired working through the first part of this lab. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about map design. All of the formal maps that you submit for this semester should have the following things. Number 1, you need to have a good title. And by good, I mean it should be descriptive and effective. So it should explain what and where. In this case, trees and major groves in Fort James Park. Number 2, a scale bar. We can talk about scale more as the semester goes on, but remember that sometimes you do need to know distances on maps. In those cases, you should have very specific, detailed scale bars. But they're basically to give your audience just a general sense of the scale. So your scale bars should be simple, the values should be rounded, and keep them subdued. They should also be placed adjacent to, or in this case, inside the map document or the map window so that you can make the comparison very easily. Okay, number 3, a legend. Only include the things on your legend that you really need. Give your audience some credit. We've all seen maps before, and your symbology should be intuitive enough that most things don't require a legend. I would argue in this case that streets is an irrelevant thing to have in your legend because the streets are obvious. The base map here has roads on them already. Laying a polyline over it is a little bit redundant. Unless the streets were important to the research for some reason, these roads mattered whereas these roads didn't. You know, that's your judgment call, and that depends on the map's purpose and the map's audience. But anyway, keep your legend very simple. A north arrow. North is assumed up on almost every map that you see. If there is no spatial context, we don't know where this is, providing some semblance of north is a good idea for your audience. If you're showing a map of the United States or a map that has a state outline, your audience knows that north is up and a north arrow is not necessary. But again, north isn't really telling us anything that important, so north arrows should be subdued, scaled down, and kept out of the way. Your name as the author, the map author, needs to go on every map that you create for this lab. And a data source. These last 2 pieces are requirements on every formal map that you make. We're trying to establish a habit. The date is another good idea to put on the map, but for our purposes, author and data source are the 2 required elements that you put on every map. It can read data courtesy of, data found at, source, anything that you want, but you're basically trying to convey that the data isn't yours and that somebody else has provided it to you. So let's just take a look at this map. If you squint your eyes a little bit, what jumps off the page? What are the most dominant things on this map when you squint at it? For me, population density, the title, pops right off, and that's good. The second thing I see are the big blue highway markers. So when we read the title, it tells us this map is about population density in Florida. And yet, the blue highway symbols are the most dominant data on this map. So they've done a really good job of maximizing the map space with the data. However, they're obscuring the areas where populations are the most dense with these enormous highway signs. So I would vote that this is an ineffective use of symbology. But remember that we read left to right, top to bottom, and you want to set up your title and your data in such a way that it makes sense for the viewer's eye. This is an idea called visual hierarchy. When I'm talking about visual hierarchy, I'm talking about the idea of using font sizes, colors, line weights, layout on the page to help your viewer's eye move around the page in the most meaningful way. Remember that the title and your data are the main players on your map. These feed the map's purpose. Everything else is a supporting character and should be kept in check. Alright, so here's an example of a really bad map. If we were in class together, I would let you sit and just talk about all the things that are wrong with this map. The things to point out, try the trick squinting your eyes again, and what pops off the page to you. To me, it's the big red river. This is terrible symbology. Rivers should always be symbolized with some shade of blue, just for intuition, not red. The flood zone is this oval, I'm assuming from the title. This should be red. The highways look like they've been symbolized in blue, again, counterintuitive. Make sure you're using intuitive symbology. The title should be big, dominant, dark, whatever you want to do, whatever trick you want to do to make sure the viewer's eye is going from here to here. These are the two main points of this map. So this size should be maximized. Placement should be done in a logical way, so you're reading left to right, top to bottom. The second thing that my eye is drawn to is this north arrow, which is, of course, atrocious. A, it's cartoony. There's no reason for it to be lime green. It never should be this big. Legend is an important thing, but again, remember, you should only include things on your legend that need to be there. And we don't need city populations. Make sure you edit your underscores out of the layers. No abbreviations, no GIS lingo. Make sure that you edit your legend items so that they're intuitive and very easy to glance at for your audience. Scale bar. You should use nice round values and keep the layout simple. Choose appropriate units for the map, but most importantly, place the scale bar adjacent to the map itself. This makes it easier to pop your eye back and forth and make the comparison. Page layout, you want to avoid big white gaping spaces like this. Maximize the data frame window and then scale everything else and place everything else to fit the page. This is that same map, slightly improved. We're still reading left to right, top to bottom in terms of importance. The symbology has been fixed. We've got road labels and we've created some spatial context here. So now we understand that all these divisions here are probably counties. We know that it's the Mississippi. The title has been improved so that we know where and what, and in this case when. The symbology has been improved so that we have an actual danger zone, rivers look like rivers, and streets look like streets. I could argue that this legend is not necessary. The interstate highways are intuitively labeled, counties aren't that important, and the Mississippi River from the title should be very clear. We could even add a Mississippi River label to this and do away with the legend altogether. But again, here we have the map's author and we have a credit for the data source. So your first assignment is to create an effective map. You can use the data that we supply for the Lab 1 exercise, or if you have your own data and would like to produce a simple map of your own data, you're absolutely welcome to do that. The goal is to make sure that you are including unique symbology and or labels for at least 2 layers. So if you've got a polyline feature class or a polygon feature class or a point file, make sure you're symbolizing it in a unique fashion or adding labels to it so that you're doing some of the same work. You're going to want to include some sort of base map for spatial context and then build the page in such a way that you're using that visual hierarchy. So here's a list of what your map should include. You want to remember that the data and the title are the most important things on the map. These should tell your audience everything they need to know. Everything else, all the other elements, should be scaled and placed appropriately, and then lay out the page in a logical way. And remember that you have to include your name and a data source somewhere on the map. And this is that mantra slide that I told you about last week. You can take a look at that, and then I'll just leave you with this thought to inspire you to work extra hard on your map.